Value transfer is nothing new. Hunt, gather, trade, expand. An exchange that's older than instinct, where the strongest prevail and the fastest survive. The function remains as its form continues to accelerate forward.
Hey, Rooshan, what's going on, man?
Hey guys, so excited to be here. I'm well, just enjoying this sunny day in New York.
Let's go. Well, good to hear. I'm sure. I mean, it's been like over 100 degrees for the past few days here in California. We've been burning up. My office is fortunately staying okay. Hopefully, it's not too bad there. But bring us into this moment. How is New York? What's it been like with this building? Working with the Alliance Accelerator, and maybe give us just your quick background too, because like I said, that's what caught my attention. I reached out because I saw your guys' LinkedIn announcement post. So I'd love to hear more, like, what's this experience been like? What's New York been like? You said you're going back to the UK soon. So yeah, bring us into the moment.
Yeah. So got into stablecoins like late last year. I'm gonna come to that, but we got here as part of the Alliance Accelerator program, which kind of requires you to come to New York, build out of here. So I got here like 3 months ago without any expectations or any sort of notions of what would happen, but completely blown away by how like the community here for stablecoins has come together. So it's been a phenomenal experience. I was speaking to Zach earlier before kind of logging in here. It was like, hey, you've got the Knicks happening, you had the World Cup here, and then on top of that, you've got such a thriving stablecoin community. And what that has meant is like a lot of the players that we want to work with, I can just kind of walk in, like, I think you showed Rain on the screen earlier, but yeah, I met the founders of Rain a bunch of times since I've been here. We're working with them on cards. We're working with somebody on stock, somebody on yield. So like all of those things, it's been just a pleasure being here because the community around stablecoins here has been phenomenal. To your question on my background, so yeah, I am originally from Pakistan, grew up there, went to college in the UK, was in investment banking, global markets for 6 years, did like a bunch of things. And then like around COVID time, felt like, hey, like what should I do with my life? And felt very strongly about the state of online education in Pakistan, where I'm from. So I saw my brother and other people in my family, like when everything went online, there wasn't much of resources for them to do something. So me and my friend, we started a company to help people study online. And yeah, to your point, like I felt like, hey, like my time in finance has been great, but I want to do something like, where I can have an impact. Did that for like 6 years, and now the company is still live and running and growing, and my co-founder is running it. But last year, what really caught my attention was I was at a startup conference, and like a bunch of people like different sectors were there. And then I met this guy from Mexico, and he was like, hey, I'm working on stablecoins. It's super interesting. And like my background is I come from like traditional finance, had no idea how like crypto works. And I just spoke to this guy. I was like, it's super interesting. You're from Mexico. I'm from like Pakistan, similar sort of challenges. Like there's a huge demand for dollars, like a lot of remittances. So Mexico is the second largest remittance receiving country in the world. Pakistan is the third largest.
Wow.
So there's a lot of interesting parallels. And I was like, oh, wow. So that just got me like thinking about like, oh, what is this interesting trend? It took me a while to get my head around it. And then once I got it, I was like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, oh, wow. As someone who's worked in markets before, like working with huge companies, what you realize that within even a huge bank, moving money from one account to the other across even borders, it's so difficult. Like you would imagine like, hey, it's just one bank. They can kind of move money across different countries, but that's not the case. So when I saw how stablecoins actually does it under the hood, I was like, okay, like guys, money's having its internet moment. We really, really need to be like, how can I be part of it? Because this is a problem I face in Pakistan when, I was receiving any money from abroad, or when I was living in London before that, I was sending money back to family. So it was a huge pain point. So that really got me thinking. I was like, okay, this is really going to change how things work. And that's what been a huge stablecoin enthusiast since.
When you think about the size of this market, you mentioned that I didn't know this. Pakistan's the third
the third largest receiver of remittances globally. Is that right?
Yeah.
What is the kind of number? What are the numbers and the addressable market around this as you're framing probably what you've been doing the last few weeks, like framing this opportunity to investors, potential supporters of the business? What is that kind of, if there was a total addressable market slide in the early part of that deck, like what does that look like? $52 billion were moved in the last 12 months into Pakistan from just consumers. This is like people who are sending money back to family. And then you have another, 6-7 billion on top probably of, people who live in Pakistan, but kind of, are getting individuals getting paid. And you have another, let's say another 40 billion on top of businesses that are receiving dollars from abroad. So the whole, in terms of the addressable market, there are $100 billion just of dollars come into the country every year. Kind of zooming in on the 52 billion, it's growing at 15% annually. And if you take out any top 10 remittance or consumer transfer countries in the world, like none of them are growing as fast. India is number one, so they're like $120 billion. Mexico is at 65 to 70, something around that ballpark. But they're, because as a function of their demographic, they're kind of staying at the level, or they're growing not as fast with Pakistan because it has one of the youngest populations in the world. We're seeing a lot of young people going out, doing things and sending money back home. So we're seeing this huge growth. And it's kind of like in the last years, because a lot of people, like the median age is like 23 right now. So a lot of people are coming of age. So they're going and getting jobs in the US, in Europe, in the Middle East. So they're sending money back. So the opportunity is that actually, like, it's growing so fast. So like 52 is what it's today, but it's probably going to be like 100 in a few years. Secondly, like it's 10% of the GDP. So there's a huge sort of push to kind of how can we make it better, like from all sides. It's such a huge part of the country's GDP and how the country runs. So that really made me think like the problem itself is there's so many layers and angles to it. And there's a huge push for it to become better. So that just made it quite of a no-brainer there.
When you think about your go-to-market plan, how much of this is focused on Pakistan, and how much of this, gets interwoven into like the global emerging market trend of stablecoins? Because I actually, we've talked with Alvin from Get Wallet, and Pakistan was one of the markets that he called out that they're seeing quite a few users in. But we've kind of seen these two sides of the barbell here. We see the people building global first. We want to serve and support 150 countries, and they're kind of agnostic into which country they're focusing on. And we've seen some on the other side that say, hey, actually, like, we think we can build a successful market doing one country really well. Where would you land on the barbell?
I think definitely we're super ambitious. So we want to kind of, maybe in the long run, get a bunch of other countries. But in the medium term, we're quite focused on just one. And we're focused on building depth. And the reason for that is two things. Firstly, like a lot of the global businesses that are being built out with the stablecoin thesis, they, at least to start off with, a lot of it is for people who are like super crypto savvy, who are like financially savvy, like, hey, like I want to keep my, stablecoin or Bitcoin in this wallet. I want to spend with it. But what we see is like, hey, like these are great rails, and a lot of people who are using it, they may even not realize that they're using like stablecoin rails without, and for them, they just want to solve a problem. And that's where we come from. And that's where my thesis is that actually, because of the regulation now, it's purely regulated. So it's completely like, okay, for the widespread people to use it. So then it opens up a new market of people who are like, hey, is this solving a problem for me? Is it making it faster and cheaper? And what it does is it gives you a foundation to build out a very interesting business on top, where you now see a lot of people living in two worlds. Like, hey, like for example, you mentioned like I live in London, but like most of my family is in Pakistan. So I'm doing a lot of back and forth. So I want to be able to manage my finances in both the worlds in a more interoperable way, which is now possible because everybody's on one ledger. I think that's like the thing, right? And same for like someone living in Pakistan who's maybe like earning from a US company, which is very common. Is like, hey, they want to be able to kind of travel the world, do things with their money, which their local bank may not be able to give them before. So I think our thesis is that focusing on one market is important, especially Because what you're also seeing is like, this morning, a bunch of stablecoin like headlines like took center stage, is a lot of the money transmission will over time kind of get somewhat commoditized or super competitive. So then the value is in like who is holding money and who is kind of giving you value on top of that. And the way to do that is that for every market, off ramps are different. For every market, the value additive services are different. So like, in some emerging market countries, people really like loyalty programs or like, partnerships. That's maybe not the case in the UK. Very different sort of, economics behind it. So having that sort of a focus on a corridor, which is as large as the one we're targeting, requires like a lot of focus initially. And obviously, once you are able to kind of get significant market share, you can kind of go around it. So the go-to market for us, to your earlier question, is, hey, how do we go into one market on both sides, senders and receivers? We work with someone sending it from the UK or the US to Pakistan, and someone in Pakistan is receiving there. Bring both of them on chain, and that kind of brings out a lot of network effects. That opens a lot of possibilities in terms of the services they could access. And that also gives us a good moat, like because we're spending a lot of time on ground understanding, okay, what are the needs, what are the like regulations behind it, which someone, let's say if you're targeting 50 countries in one go, might be a bit tricky.
Yeah. What's your experience been like bringing this product to life? I imagine you have friends and family back home, you said in Pakistan. Have they gotten their hands on the app, and have there been any just like aha moments where they're like, this is, we know that these apps are solving problems, but I feel like it has a lot more impact when it happens to somebody more close to home, maybe a friend or a family member, or we hear that, making the app so easy, your grandma or your mom could use it. Like, does your grandma use overseas pay? And is she just like, this is the best thing I've ever used? What's it been
She
like
better be.
seeing this product come to life?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've had a lot of moments like that, mostly with my peers and my friends. So a good friend of mine is in London, like, he's sending money back home, and I think he was one of our early customers. And now he messaged me the other day, he's like, hey, I need two more things. I need to be able to firstly, because he's kind of sending, he's like managing a lot of things back home. He's like, hey, I want a pot that I could invest money in, and the returns from that pot, be it equities or something else, I want to kind of use that money to send back home. So you have these interesting problems people are coming with, and just like, can you just bring on equities or like a yield product on the app? Or someone else has come to me, is like, hey, I want to get my parents like health insurance. And obviously, like, if you can be the distributor for that, that would be awesome. So yeah, a lot of close friends and family are coming and are like, hey, like, how can we use the product and kind of, get to this point where we are? And I think that's been a great experience for me. Like, for example, I myself now use it. Like, we've got a card that, like, I'm all over New York tapping it everywhere. But I think that's been like quite a good feeling to have like close friends and family use it to like with their hard-earned money, and not just use it, come to me and be like, hey, I love this, but can I also get that? And I think that feedback loop is, I think, something that we want to kind of sustain and kind of get it to the next level. And yeah, I think the other thing is, yes, having like your grandmother or like somebody like who's not super crypto savvy use it. That's like definitely our ambition, because you want to abstract away all the complexity, right? If you open the app today, you go through it, it will feel like any other app, but in the back end, you've got super regulated stablecoin infrastructure that allows you to do things that were unthinkable for people. Like, especially like what we've been interestingly seeing is like people, like their family members spread across different geographies. One is in Pakistan, one's in Canada, one's in like the UK. They're now all able to kind of manage their finances in a way which was unthinkable before, right? Because previously either all of them were on one platform, like, and it was still not as seamless. So that's super interesting for us. And they're thinking of like, how can you pool money together, do investments together? A lot of interesting things coming out of that.
It's really, really interesting. The idea of like the structure in my head that is often very common, at least in the US from what I've seen, is a similar type of like management infrastructure, but between parents and children, where the parents will like help set up wealth accounts. Like you're seeing Trump accounts and all the stuff of like parents to child. It's a very similar type of like business model or structure from what it looks like, just pointing from child to parent who are maybe older or like, are you seeing that? Is that trend because folks around the world who might be traveling out of their home country, like Pakistan, are working in these high income markets, and then
Yes.
their families actually will start to rely on them for like as a primary source of income. And then that person actually kind of becomes the little like family office like function in the family. Is that what is typically happening?
100%. That's exactly what we're seeing, is that people, like people who are like doing great jobs in Silicon Valley or working, in high finance or something like that. They're exactly like, they're like the family office. They're managing investments on behalf of their siblings or parents, or they're kind of sending like money back. So you have these interesting things happening. Or like historically, what would happen is like, let's say one sibling is working in New York and one is in, let's say, Pakistan, and the one in Pakistan is like, hey, I want to get like a Tesla or like a SpaceX stock. So then they would kind of figure out a way how to kind of net it out. But like with stable coins, you can kind of bring everybody on one platform and they can do a lot of these things together if they want. So that's super interesting. And yeah, also people want to be able to manage, like, especially as their parents get older, like, hey, how can I make sure that they get the best healthcare? How can I make sure that, I can pay any provider on their behalf? So you have these very interesting sort of use cases are coming out, and which are like very, very like significant pain points, right? So there is no compromise in terms of the quality and the reliability of the service, which makes, obviously huge responsibility for us. But the family office sort of parallel is very spot on.
Yeah, it's how do you think about building for this person? So I'm imagining this person's in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They're in like a high earning bucket, like our age group. I have not heard about the idea of purchasing stocks or helping, or I'll give an example maybe on how this gets personal for me. So my grandfather just passed away. My mom is now inheriting assets from my grandpa. And my mom is not like, if we were to put ourselves side by side, like I would be in a better position to probably take action or help manage where that money goes in the markets. Like typically my mom is going, or what she'll probably do is like, these people are going to go work with a broker or work with some like traditional firm who then provides that financial advisory. Even in the US for this use case, I can see that use case becoming more common, where if platforms lean into this idea of like, hey, parent, you might be actually sitting on a lot of this capital or be like the ones who custody it or are in control of it, but you actually trust your younger, more in the markets son or daughter, and building a platform where the parents can perhaps keep custody, but then you kind of delegate. Are you sort of seeing these trends start to happen?
It's almost like ordinal. It's almost like I can send you a post. You're the blocking approval.
We do
It's
this
like,
for social media content.
Yeah, this is like I send him posts. He is, it's scheduled to go out, but he has to approve it first. I'm like,
yes, you approve.
Send trades over to his mom.
It's exactly how big wealth management works with signing and consensus. It's like a very similar use case.
No, definitely. I think a lot of interesting things that we're seeing is also you got to kind of take a step back to understand a lot of how this works. So like one use case you rightly said, that's one thing. But the other thing is like, let's say if somebody's sending their kid to college in the US, like I think a lot of times people in Pakistan, they're like, hey, we're going to send our kid to like some really top-notch college. But maybe like, the cost of that is really high. So there's this expectation, like, that's like, there's an ROI on that as well. So like, he or she is going to kind of help us out. So you have this interesting sort of situation where they are also like, hey, I want to kind of contribute to the family pot so that we as a family build more wealth. So you have these interesting dynamics where like, hey, they're also managing it, but they're also kind of actively contributing to it. So when they actively contribute to it, what does it mean? Like, it means like, hey, like, can I buy a house for my family, like, which is bigger than it is right now, so that, when I visit, there's more space. So like, hey, can I get a joint mortgage? Or like, stuff like that, which is, or like if my sibling, like say I was the elder sibling and it was a decision that my parents were like, hey, we're going to pay for their college and now they're going to help us kind of support the other kids. So you have these very, very specific cultural dynamics that also play out. And that kind of leans into the whole wealth management aspect, because they all kind of view their wealth as like one, and how can we kind of distribute it across, or like get dividends across the family. So I think historically, because everything was on different platforms, or like it was very difficult to send money at the best possible rate, especially when the amounts start getting bigger. And that is definitely our objective, is like, as the world gets more global, how do you kind of build a more global financial system? And this is super personal to me, because like I've now kind of been back and forth, and like having to send money and receive money and kind of managing in different countries is it's been a huge hassle. And oftentimes, yes, I'm receiving something from my parents, or sometimes I'm giving. So you have this whole thing going on. And on a more broader level, what we are seeing is that, the system, like the fiat system, was built for a world that where primarily the economic and the population was concentrated either in Europe or was concentrated in the US. But now if you see the global sort of demographic, most of it will come from Africa or Asia. So the financial system has to be ready for that. And what stablecoins does is it gives you the ability to kind of build first for that world and kind of make it more inclusive. So it doesn't really matter if one member is on the other country or the other. So that's really what we're seeing.
Rooshan, I know you mentioned earlier, like it's super easy for you to meet people like Rain, who, funny enough, you'll probably see
Just
on
Rain just to join the green room. Yeah.
What's the approach been like, and how are you thinking through? How much are you building in house with this type of product, especially from ground zero? Normally, we start with founders that are maybe 6 to 12 months into the journey. You're just going, live with the product versus, working with like partners like Rain. Is it more, or the focus right now is, hey, we just got to get the product together, get it live, and we're not going to go as deep as we normally do into this just because of time. But are there any areas right now where, like, even though we're early, we're building this in-house that's a non-negotiable?
Great question. So I think we've been live for about a little over 4 months. We've almost doubled every month. I think even more than that. Like, it's been a crazy journey. And Brain, we worked with them. It was a pleasure working with the team there. In terms of what are we doing in-house, what are we not, I think a very good heuristic for me is how much of it is kind of differentiates us versus how much of it just kind of is like table stakes. So for example, like some things like a card program and are getting table stakes, you just obviously find the best provider and you kind of be like, hey, this is what it's going to be. But something on more like, hey, what is my last mile going to be like? What is my off ramp going to be like? What are my value additive services going to be like? I think that's where the differentiation, the regulation for every geo gets different. So you really want to lead into that. And secondly is the compliance aspect of it, because we're dealing with very different sort of markets. Like, so then sure, you use some of the off-the-shelf tools for the US or Europe, but for the last mile, you need to kind of build out a muscle yourself as to like, hey, here's the receiver. What do we need for them? How do we kind of connect them to the world? So I think that's something we're not compromising on the compliance piece.
That has,
I'm gonna hold my tongue, Zach.
No, that is a recurring compliance. Like, that is almost a non-negotiable. If somebody didn't build it in-house, they wish they did, or they're building it in-house.
I just see the Microsoft meme. Compliance.
But yeah, what's next though? Alliance is coming to an end. Like I said, you're going back to the UK. What's on your like go-to-market agenda right now? Where do we go from here?
So firstly, I think we're just a team of, just like me and my co-founder, and we just hired like 2 contractors to support us. So we've been like super lean. So we just want to hire more, because to give you a sense, we have like a wait list 4 times the size of our user base. So I think that's now the problem. We're like, hey, how do we onboard these people and how do we service them? And so first we want to make sure that instead of kind of getting new users, we kind of get the people in our pipeline too. That's order number 1. And number 2 is that I'm now in the UK and I'm going to meeting the regulators and lawyers. We're going to get ourselves regulated in each and every jurisdiction that we are kind of getting money from, so that gives us another moat, our ability to be, super forthcoming with how, we can, the partners we can work with, the people we can onboard. And generally, like, it just gives, like, especially the world is now transitioning away from, hey, crypto is a gray area, to like, hey, this is how we regulate it. And we want to be at the forefront of that, because that just gives us more flexibility even in the long run. When we're like, hey, I want to enter XYZ similar market, because they have similar dynamics. Like, hey, the sending market covered, we can just go there and replicate it. And also, like, even in Pakistan, what we're seeing is like, they really want people to be regulated in a relevant jurisdiction that are sending money from it. So for us, that we really want to get that across the board. And already, obviously, the growth that we're seeing is just phenomenal. And we just want to kind of make sure that we go from doubling every month to tripling every month.
Yeah. Awesome.
Rooshan, we will continue to follow the journey here. And thanks for bringing us into it. Congrats on closing out Alliance. We've been really grateful to meet a handful of other cohort members of that crew lately. That group just seems to attract some really, really interesting builders in this layer and building some really cool stuff.
Actually,
how many teams are going through that? Like around a dozen or so, you said?
I think around 15 or so, yeah, 15 companies.
Per cohort go through that. They do that cohorts. Yeah. How often is it?
I think it's 3 times a year.
Okay.
Is there anybody else from your cohort that you think we should have on the show?
That's a great question. I don't want to name names because then I'll miss out on somebody, but there's like some really cool stuff happening out of Africa. So you've got Bullring, you've got Tumi, you've got FluidKey. I think in terms of stablecoins, those 3 are like building neobanks for very different use cases. So you should definitely kind of see one of those 3 guys. And other than that, I think other people are building, but I think more other crypto stuff, not stablecoins.
Well, we like to cover the whole breadth of modern money. So if anybody pops up post show, shoot me a message on LinkedIn, and we'd love to get them on.
For sure. I mean, people are doing some really interesting corridors, and like some very interesting things are coming out. So we'll also send you a message. You can get in touch with them.
Right on.
Sounds great, Sean. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers.